I gripped the edge of the bathroom counter, knuckles white, staring at the damning video on my phone. My heart pounded as I watched Caleb viciously strike our son Ethan again and again, the sickening sounds of his fists hitting flesh echoing off the tiled walls. Ethan's muffled cries tore through me like shards of glass. How could the man I'd once loved, the father of my children, be capable of such brutality? I barely recognized Caleb in that moment. Gone was the polished, successful businessman who charmed everyone he met with his easy smile and impeccable manners. This raging monster, disfigured by hate, was his true self, the one he worked so hard to conceal behind closed doors. My hands shook as tears blurred my vision. "Mommy?" I spun around to see Ella standing in the doorway, her stuffed bunny dangling from one hand. Her big brown eyes were wide with fear at the commotion. "It's okay, baby." I forced a reassuring smile and scooped her up, hugging her tightly. "Mommy just stubbed her toe really hard." Ella nodded solemnly, still looking worried. I brushed her soft curls back, my heart clenching at how innocent and trusting she was. She and Ethan had no idea the hell their father put us through when the doors closed and his mask slipped away. Over Ella's head, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My face was pale and drawn from years of Caleb's emotional torture, my eyes haunted. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, suffocating under the weight of his control and abuse. But seeing that horrific video was the breaking point. I couldn't let him keep hurting my babies. Not anymore. I held Ella close, determination replacing my fear. "We're gonna be okay," I whispered fiercely. "I promise." I first met Caleb at a charity gala downtown. He looked like he'd stepped right out of a GQ magazine. Impeccably tailored tuxedo, thick chestnut hair perfectly coiffed, that disarming smile. When our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, I felt an electric pull toward him. "Vivian, right?" His deep voice caressed my name as he approached. "I'm Caleb. I've been looking forward to meeting you." We talked for hours, his intense gaze never leaving my face. He hung on my every word, making me feel fascinating, desirable. I was intoxicated by his attentiveness. Caleb came from old money and worked as a high-powered finance executive. He regaled me with stories of his world travels, his charitable endeavors, his love of art and culture. Here was a man of substance, I decided, not just another wealthy, pretty boy. 2 months of whirlwind romance later, Caleb proposed in a plaza in Venice as gondolas drifted by. I said yes without hesitation, giddy to become Mrs. Caleb Westbrook. The wedding was like a fairy tale, designer dress, hundreds of guests, flower arrangements that cost more than my college tuition. Caleb's eyes shone with pride as I floated down the aisle. His arm looped through my father's. I basked in his adoration. Soon I was pregnant with Ethan, thrilled at the prospect of being a doting stay-at-home mom. Caleb insisted on hiring staff to help, nannies, chefs, personal trainers. He wanted me to embrace a life of pampered luxury, to want for nothing. At first, his controlling tendencies were easy to overlook or excuse. He'd get worked up over small things, a wrinkle in his suit, the nanny showing up 2 minutes late. But I chalked it up to the stress of his high-powered career. Caleb worked himself to the bone, providing for us. He deserved grace. Then Ella arrived, and Caleb's behavior took an even darker turn. "You call this a properly set table?" He sneered at our housekeeper, sweeping the plates and silverware onto the floor with one violent motion. "Do I have to do everything myself?" The poor woman fled in tears as Caleb turned his glare on me. "This is unacceptable, Vivian. I expect a certain standard in this household." I flinched, arms tightening around Ella. I'm sorry, it won't happen again." "You're damn right it won't." His voice was low, dangerous, because if I see one more mistake, you'll regret it. From that day on, I walked on eggshells around Caleb, never knowing what would set off his hair-trigger temper. The slightest perceived infraction could prompt a tirade of verbal abuse. "This pot roast is dry and flavorless. Are you trying to poison us?" He shoved his plate away violently, completely inedible. I stared at my feet, cheeks burning with shame. "I'm sorry, I'll make something else right away. Don't bother." Caleb's lip curled in disgust. "I'll have Maria prepare my meal from now on. At least she can follow basic cooking instructions." Tears pricked my eyes as our housekeeper Maria rushed to make Caleb a new dinner. I felt like a failure as a wife and mother. Caleb scrutinized my every move, from how I dressed and did my hair, to my interactions with the children. Ethan and Ella walked on eggshells too, terrified of provoking his wrath. "Sit up straight and stop fidgeting," Caleb barked at Ethan over Sunday brunch. "A Westbrook man has poise and confidence." Ethan froze mid-squirm, back ramrod straight. At 8 years old, he understood the consequences of defying his father. If I dared voice any objections to Caleb's unreasonable demands, I was swiftly shut down. "Who puts food on this table and keeps a roof over your head?" he snarled, towering over me. "You're damn lucky to have me." His words reinforced my utter financial dependence on him. I had no income, no assets in my name. Caleb controlled every penny. I was trapped. Caleb also cut me off from my family and friends, insisting they were a bad influence. I went months, even years, without seeing my sister Dana or parents. My world shrank to the confines of our mansion, a gilded prison. The breaking point came when Caleb flew into a rage over Ella's kindergarten artwork, a simple finger painting of flowers. "She has no talent, no potential," he scoffed, crumpling it into a ball and tossing it at her feet. "I won't allow her to waste time on frivolous pursuits." Ella dissolved into heartbroken sobs, and something inside me finally snapped. I gathered her and Ethan into my arms, shielding them from Caleb's cruelty. "That's enough," I cried, voice shaking with a mixture of fear and defiance. "They're just children, Caleb. Back off and leave them alone." His eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed to slits of cold fury. Before I could blink, his hand streaked across my face with stinging force. "How dare you talk back to me?" he hissed, grabbing a fistful of my hair. "I'll teach you some respect, you ungrateful." That night, as Caleb slept off his drunken rage, I crept into Ethan and Ella's rooms and gently roused them. "Pack a small bag," very quietly, I whispered urgently. "Just a few clothes and special toys. We're going on a little trip." They blinked at me with wide, trusting eyes, but didn't question my instructions. Ethan helped Ella gather her favorite stuffed animals while I threw some essentials into a duffel bag. My heart hammered in my chest as I grabbed my phone and called Dana for the first time in over a year. She answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. "Viv? What's wrong? Are you okay?" "No," I choked out, finally allowing the tears to flow. "It's Caleb. He hits me, Dana. He hits the kids too." There was a sharp intake of breath. "Oh my God, I knew that bastard was trouble. I just knew it." "Where are you?" "Still at home, but I can't stay. Not after tonight." I glanced over at Ethan and Ella, curled together on the couch, clutching their meager belongings. "We need to get out before he wakes up." "Absolutely. You come here right now. I'll leave the front door unlocked. Get in your car and drive straight here, you hear me?" Relief washed over me, knowing my big sister had my back like always. "Thank you. I'll be there as soon as I can." After ending the call, I gathered the kids and crept down the stairs, keeping an eye out for any signs of Caleb stirring. I hurried them out the front door and into the waiting car, throwing their bags into the trunk. Ethan looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes as I started the engine. "Is Daddy going to be mad we're leaving?" My chest tightened, hating that my babies had to know such fear. "No, honey. We're just going to stay with Auntie Dana for a little while, that's all." It was a little white lie to protect them. The truth was, I didn't know if we'd ever be coming back here again. I just knew we couldn't stay a moment longer. As we pulled away, I resisted the urge to look back at the cold, imposing facade of the mansion. It had been a waking nightmare, not a home. I took a deep, steadying breath, focusing on the road ahead. For the first time in years, a glimmer of hope bloomed in my chest. We were getting out. We were going to be okay. The next morning, Caleb awoke to find us gone without a trace. Judging by the string of increasingly unhinged voicemails and texts I received, he was in an apocalyptic rage. His messages swung wildly between vicious threats and pleading for me to come back home so he could make things right. I deleted every one without responding. There was no going back, not this time. I was done with Caleb's mind games and empty promises to change. With Dana's help, I filed an emergency petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and years of physical and emotional abuse. The judge granted a temporary restraining order against Caleb, prohibiting him from going anywhere near me, the kids, or Dana's house. For the first time in nearly a decade, I could finally breathe again without fearing his next outburst. Caleb no longer controlled me or my children. We were free. Dana's cozy two-bedroom felt like a sanctuary after the cavernous emptiness of the mansion. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely without Caleb's looming presence. "You're safe here, Viv," Dana assured me, wrapping me in a fierce hug. "That monster can't get to you anymore." I clung to her, letting the tears flow. "Thank you for taking us in. I don't know what I'd do without you." She held me at arm's length, green eyes blazing with protective fury. "You've been through hell, but it's over now. We'll get through this together, okay?" I managed a shaky nod, drawing strength from her unwavering support. With Dana at my side, I knew I could face whatever came next. The first few nights, I barely slept, body tensed for Caleb's raging arrival at any moment. Every creak of the house settling made me jolt upright in a cold sweat. But gradually, the comfort and security of being with Dana seeped in. Ethan and Ella adapted quickly too, their fear and stress visibly melting away. Soon they were running and playing without worrying about triggering their father's wrath. The sound of their unbridled laughter was music to my ears. About a week after our arrival, Dana and I were having coffee at her kitchen table when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I frowned but still answered cautiously. "This is she. You ungrateful little bitch." Caleb's voice exploded in my ear, making me flinch. "You think you can just walk out on me? Take my kids?" Dana's head snapped up, eyes narrowing at the venom in his tone. I gripped the phone tighter, mustering my courage. "It's over, Caleb. I've filed for divorce, and there's a restraining order against you. Don't come near us again." He let out a bark of malicious laughter. "A piece of paper won't stop me, Vivian. You're my wife. Those are my children. You'll be crawling back soon enough, begging for forgiveness." "I'll never go back to you." I shot back, anger emboldening me. "Not after what you did to Ethan. I saw the video, you sick fuck." There was a charged pause before he responded, voice low and menacing. "So that's how you want to play it? Fine, but you'll regret turning against me. This isn't over, not by a long shot." The line went dead as he hung up. I stared at the phone, hands trembling. Dana reached across the table, gripping my arm firmly. "Don't let him rattle you, Viv. That's what he wants. We'll fight this asshole and we'll win." I squared my shoulders, feeding off her strength and certainty. For the first time in a long time, I let myself feel hopeful about our future, a future without Caleb's cruelty poisoning every aspect of our lives. No more walking on eggshells. No more fear and intimidation tactics. Just me, my kids, and the freedom to live our lives on our own terms without his abuse holding us back. Caleb could make all the empty threats he wanted. I was done being a victim. From now on, I'd be the one dictating how this story ended. Despite the restraining order, Caleb wasn't deterred from trying to regain control. A few days after his threatening phone call, I was putting the kids down for their afternoon nap when the doorbell rang incessantly. "I'll get it," Dana called out, heading for the front door. I tucked Ella's blanket around her when a booming voice made me freeze. "Where is she? Where's my family?" My blood turned to ice at the unmistakable sound of Caleb's roar. I raced out to the living room to find him shoving his way inside, Dana desperately trying to block his path. "Get out!" she screamed, hands braced against his chest. "You're violating the restraining order." Caleb flung her aside like a rag doll, her small frame crashing into the wall with a sickening thud. She crumpled to the floor, dazed. "Dana." I rushed to her side, but she waved me off. "I'm okay, just get the kids." Ethan and Ella had ventured out, eyes wide with terror at the sight of their raging father. Caleb zeroed in on them, face contorted into an ugly snarl. "You two disobedient brats are coming home with me right now." He lunged for them, and I threw myself in front, arms flung out protectively. "Don't you dare touch them!" Caleb backhanded me hard across the face, snapping my head to the side. I could taste blood from a split lip. "Get out of my way, you little whore!" Ethan shrank back against the wall, shaking like a leaf, while Ella began wailing in fear. Caleb made another grab for them, and I kicked him hard in the shin. He grunted in pain, giving me a brief window. "Run!" I screamed at the kids. "Go hide in Dana's bedroom and lock the door." They took off as Caleb recovered, rounding on me with murderous intent. He shoved me down, straddling my body and pinning my arms over my head. His face hovered inches above mine, eyes burning with sick hatred. "You're not taking them from me," he spat, spittle hitting my face. "I'll kill you before I let that happen, you ungrateful bitch." His hands closed around my throat, squeezing viciously. Black spots danced in my vision as I choked and sputtered, legs kicking helplessly. Just as the world started going dim, a heavy ceramic vase shattered against the back of Caleb's skull with a sickening crunch. He slumped forward, finally releasing me as I gasped for air. Dana stood over us, chest heaving, the broken remains of the vase at her feet. "That's for my niece and nephew, you piece of garbage!" Caleb groaned, rolling off me and clutching his bloody head. I scrambled away, coughing violently as Dana dialed 911 with shaking hands. Within minutes, the police swarmed in, taking statements and photographs of our injuries. Caleb was cuffed and hauled out to the squad car, still ranting and raving about his rights as a father. In the chaos, I barely registered Ella's piercing screams coming from the bedroom. I rushed in to find her cradling her rag doll, eyes squeezed shut as blood poured from a gash above her eye. She must have been struck by shrapnel from the vase. White-hot rage blazed through me, burning away any lingering fear of Caleb's retaliation. He had just crossed a line from which there could be no return. From that moment on, I knew there would be no more running, no more hiding, only the total and complete obliteration of Caleb's depraved existence as we knew it. He would pay dearly for ever laying a hand on my babies. Whatever it took, I vowed to utterly destroy him. After Caleb's violent attack, Dana and I knew we couldn't just sit back and wait for his next move. We had to take him down first, permanently and ruthlessly. No more playing defense. "That deranged psychopath isn't going to stop until he's destroyed us all," Dana said grimly as we pored over the evidence, photos of our injuries, the restraining order violation, everything. "We have to hit him from every angle until he has nothing left." I nodded, jaw clenched with grim determination. Any remnants of the meek, cowering woman I'd been under reign of terror were gone. In her place was a merciless force, driven by icy focus and the overwhelming need to protect my children at all costs. "You're right. It's time to go scorched earth on that bastard's entire life." We spent weeks meticulously strategizing, burning the midnight oil to amass an airtight case against Caleb. Dana's law enforcement contacts helped dig up records of his abusive behavior going back years, police reports from exes, former employees' harassment claims, the whole sordid history. I also unearthed evidence of shady business dealings and tax evasion at Caleb's firm. The narcissist had been living way beyond his means, funneling money into slush funds and offshore accounts. He thought he was untouchable. "This is everything we need to take down the great Caleb Westbrook," Dana said, fanning out the thick dossier with a satisfied smile. "The lying, the cheating, the abuse, it's all here in excruciating detail." My lip curled with disgust looking at the paper trail of his depravity. "Good, let's burn it all to the ground." We spent weeks making anonymous tips to the IRS, FBI, state financial crimes units, anyone who could bring charges to bear on Caleb's crooked empire. Each agency opened investigations based on our evidence, slowly tightening the vice around his neck. While the wheels of justice began turning, I also filed an explosive civil suit against Caleb, alleging over a decade of physical, emotional, and financial abuse. The lurid claims, backed up by documentation and witness statements, caused a media firestorm. Caleb's lawyers scrambled to contain the fallout as his public image was dragged through the mud. His formerly squeaky clean reputation as a pillar of the community and devoted family man lay in tatters. As the weeks passed, the dominoes continued falling at a dizzying pace. The IRS completed its audit first, hitting Caleb with crushing fines, tax penalties, and frozen assets for his financial crimes. Next came the FBI indictments on fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering charges. With his cash flow dammed up, Caleb was forced to resign in disgrace from his executive position. The company he'd spent decades building quickly moved to cut all ties, fearful of the toxic public relations disaster he'd become. Finally, the restraining order violations and mountain of abuse evidence caught up to him. Caleb was arrested again, this time charged with multiple felonies that could put him behind bars for decades. As I watched the cavalcade of mugshots and shaming headlines, I felt an almost perverse sense of glee. The narcissistic monster who had terrorized me and my children for so long was getting his ultimate comeuppance, a richly deserved downfall of his own making. Caleb had always prided himself on being untouchable, above the rules that governed everyone else. He was about to learn the hard way that no amount of wealth or status could protect him from true justice. The mighty Caleb Westbrook had officially fallen, crashing down in flames. And I had a front-row seat to revel in every agonizing second of it. The day of Caleb's sentencing hearing, Dana and I made sure to get prime seats in the courtroom gallery. I wanted a front-row view of the monster's downfall. Caleb was led in by armed bailiffs, his once impeccable appearance now disheveled, overgrown hair, rumpled suit, haunted eyes. The mighty had fallen so far. I felt a twinge of satisfaction seeing him in handcuffs. The charges against him were lengthy: tax evasion, fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, multiple counts of violating restraining orders, and felony assault and battery against me and the kids. It was a laundry list of the most despicable white-collar and domestic crimes. Caleb's expensive legal team tried to bargain for a lighter sentence, citing his previous charitable work and lack of criminal history. But the judge seemed utterly unmoved by their pleas for leniency. The evidence here paints a clear picture of a violent, unrepentant criminal who believed himself to be above the law, the judge stated sternly. Someone who would brutalize his own wife and children has forfeited any right to walk freely among civilized society. With that, he handed down a sentence of 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Caleb's eyes widened in disbelief as the reality hit him. I could see the fight finally leaving his body as the bailiffs moved to take him into custody. "Wait!" he cried out, voice tinged with desperation as his gaze found me in the gallery. "Vivian, please. You have to believe I've changed. I'll get help. We can make this work." I stared back at him, unmoved by his pleading words. He was the same pathetic, manipulative con man he'd always been, unable to take true responsibility. "It's over, Caleb," I said, voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You had your chance to be a decent human being, and you failed spectacularly. Now you get to rot away behind bars like the subhuman piece of filth you are." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him, jaw going slack. In that moment, the last remnants of the suave, sophisticated facade finally cracked away to reveal the sniveling coward underneath. As the bailiffs pulled him out, Caleb fixed me with one last poisonous glare over his shoulder. "You'll regret this, Vivian. You're going to pay." I simply smiled and waved farewell with sardonic sweetness. His empty threats held no power over me anymore. In the end, Caleb lost everything: his career, his wealth, his social standing, even his precious freedom. The mighty Westbrook empire he'd built through corruption and abuse had been burnt to the ground, its ashes scattered to the wind. My once formidable tormentor was nothing more than a caged animal now, his vicious bite permanently defanged. I'd won. In the weeks that followed, I savored my newfound liberation like a delicious wine. Dana and I sold off what remained of Caleb's assets to pay off my legal debts and set up college funds for Ethan and Ella. I even took the kids on a celebratory vacation to Hawaii, building sandcastles and splashing in the waves without a care in the world. For the first time in over a decade, I could finally breathe freely, unburdened from the crushing weight of Caleb's cruelty. The constant fear and tension that had plagued every moment had evaporated like a bad dream. My babies were happy and whole once more. I'd sacrificed and plotted, fought tooth and nail to regain control of our lives. In the end, the blood, sweat, and tears were all worth it to ensure that abusive monster could never hurt us again. Caleb's reign of terror over our family was permanently finished. We were free. We had survived his worst and emerged victorious on the other side. As I gazed at Ethan and Ella's bright, beaming faces, I knew our future was limitless. A new chapter was finally beginning, one of peace, healing, and limitless possibilities unfurled before us, and this time I held the pen.